This was the first article that caught my attention in a very long time. It was discussing the differences between a narcissist, a grandiose narcissist, and then a new type of narcissist that they're kind of like starting to be able to identify, which is a vulnerable narcissist. So the author, Miriam Frankel, she starts the article by describing what narcissism is. It's a person with a sense of superiority, entitlement, low levels of empathy, constant need of admiration, easily slighted. And she goes on and says that this affects 1 in 20 people. Clinical narcissism, okay? Don't make this fit to your baby daddy just because you don't like him. But the assistant professor of psychology at the University of Southampton, Claire Hart, says that number is actually higher. Okay, never mind. So maybe your baby daddy might be a narcissist. The author then goes into differences between what a grandiose narcissist is and a vulnerable narcissist. Your grandiose narcissist is the type that will brag about themselves, that are the lives of the party. They're highly socially skilled and rather intelligent. Now, a vulnerable type of narcissist, this is the person who's insecure and defensive, and they try their best to make sure that you only see specific parts of them, the parts that they want you to like. There was one recent study done that showed that both of the grandiose and vulnerable narcissists were driven by a desire for social status, but the vulnerable narcissists felt that they hadn't gotten the status they deserved. They always felt like, why not me? It should be me. Another big difference between the grandiose and the vulnerable narcissist was that the vulnerable narcissist felt that they weren't included in social groups as much as they should be, whereas the grandiose didn't care. They were the ones, I'm too good for this party anyway. The vulnerable type of narcissist feels that if you criticize them, it's a personal affront to their integrity. And if they have a chance of not winning in a competition, they won't even play because a loss is devastating. Associate Professor Claire Hart says you don't know when they're going to blow. Vulnerable narcissists are more often passive aggressive than confrontational. So think basically the way that BBL Drizzy sneak disses, that kind of energy. One of my favorite parts about the article, the author went into detail about some situations that would play out, and you can see how a vulnerable narcissist would act. One example she gives is if you're at work and your boss is telling you how good of a job you're doing, but doesn't do the same thing for the vulnerable narcissist. They would say that they're happy to you, but then talk trash behind your back and tell other people about the key role that they played instead. They want the spotlight to be on them, but they also still want you to like them. They'll even start probing into your life, trying to find little details that they don't like about you so that they can use that against you in the future. Another amazing example she gives is if your boss was a vulnerable narc and you went behind their back to go get some advice from their boss or from another superior manager, they might try to withhold opportunities from you, exclude you from things, and talk trash again behind your back. These are people that need you to like them and have to have the attention on them at any cost, but they use covert ways in order to get it. He then goes on to discuss the differences in experience you may have if you were in a relationship with a grandiose narcissist versus a vulnerable narcissist. Grandiose narcs are always on the lookout for something better. They're never satisfied, so they oftentimes will cheat. Meanwhile, vulnerable narcs tend to be a lot more needy and controlling and manipulative in less obvious ways, like blaming you or other people for things that are their own fault, or by taking criticism as a personal attack and then making you feel bad for voicing how you feel. In this next part, she talks about a really interesting test that is actually used to assess narcissistic traits in people. And it's made up of 40 questions. You get a 0 if you choose a modest response. You get a 1 if you choose the more narcissistic response, right? The results of the test were interesting. It revealed that the UK, their average response was 12 out of 40. And for the US, it was 16 out of 40. What does that tell you? The results also revealed that grandiose narcissism was more common in men and vulnerable narcissism was more common in women, and that clinicians will often misdiagnose borderline personality disorder in women when it's really vulnerable narcissism. Before we go any further, I just want to say that does not mean that all women or all people who have BPD are actually, in fact, vulnerable narcissists. Don't make that math. This last part, she talks about how to trick a narcissist into becoming more empathetic. Some of those tactics involve convincing the narcissist that if they're able to see things from other people's perspectives, that they'll have higher success in business and leadership. Telling them that empathy is the key to getting more status. Another way to trick the narcissist is to convince them that through acts of kindness and generosity, that they'll be seen in a better light to other people. This strokes their ego, which makes them in turn kinder and more compassionate to other people, albeit for selfish reasons. But if it works, it works. I really want y'all to pay attention to this last part though. Before you try to tackle any suspected narcissist, it may be worth reflecting on your own behavior first. If you aren't willing and able to take a long and hard look at yourself, you may miss the hidden narcissist right under your nose.